I am of the firm belief that Calypso has a lot to offer to songwriting in general.
Let me bless the studio. Fix up the microphone. Check 1, 2, 3, go. Sure. This is Udo Ibeleme, your host, and welcome to the show.
Preach Jesus.
Now, this might be a bias, but if you can't tell from my accent, I am a Trinidadian. I'm proud to be from the Twin Isle Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm also Nigerian by descent, but I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, and I love my country, right? Now, one of the things that Trinidad has given to the world is Calypso music. Often overlooked and not seen as a viable commercial genre nowadays, but Calypso, I think, is very important. As a matter of fact, Calypso was formative for my own development as a songwriter in general. You understand? Calypso and hip-hop shaped me in a lot of ways when it comes to these things. And so my conviction and my experience is that the facets of songwriting skill that you pick up somewhere like Calypso is transferable and becomes beneficial in other areas. And that is what I want to talk about today. So I want my brothers and sisters who write songs just like I do to be able to learn from Calypso, right? Not necessarily to get into it. Not everyone should be a Calypsonian necessarily, but Calypso has a lot that it can teach us. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Let's start with 2 scriptures. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 29 says, "Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." Proverbs chapter 21 verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." All right? The first thing that I think that we can learn from the genre of Calypso is discipline. The more I interact with young songwriters and even people who, they may be my peers, is that I realize that sometimes what creativity means is that whatever comes out of me is what goes down. The problem with that is that vomit also comes out of us, right? And so the quality control has to come from us in our creative processes and before our creative processes to ensure that what we're doing is good. In the same way that when God created the world, he was making sure that everything that he was doing was good. Now, when it comes to this in particular, what I notice about Calypso is that it has a rigid structure. Recently, we went through Carnival here in Trinidad and Tobago, and veteran Calypsonian, actually the most decorated Calypsonian as far as Calypso monarchs are concerned in this country, Calypso monarch titles, Dr. Hollis Liverpool, also known as the mighty Chalk Dust. He had some words for what he believed to be the state of Calypso, and while I wouldn't comment on every single thing that he said, he did say something that I found important, instructive, and has been something that I've noticed about Calypso that has impacted me. Calypso has a rigid structure. When you write a verse and chorus coupled together, you are laying a blueprint down for yourself that you will follow again and again, verse after verse. The rhyme scheme, as far as the rhyme scheme pattern, let me say, of the verse and chorus couple has to be copied again. The melody, meaning the notes that you sing, as well as the rhythm in which you sing them, that has to be copied again. It's rigid like that. And so when you have, in this year's competition, for instance, someone like Squeezy Rankin, whose background is not in Calypso, and he comes into the competition and he has a strong offering with a strong message, it is easy for a veteran Calypsonian like Chalk Dust to hear that Squeezy is not singing, hasn't crafted the Calypso like a Calypsonian. He has used a little bit of the freedom that he might get from the genres that he might be more accustomed to, which would be like the dancehall, etc. Right? There's a bit more freedom as to how you ride the beats for one verse over the next verse. You don't have to, it's not as rigid, I love Calypso. I've also done dancehall. Dancehall was the first thing that I did as a solo artist. And it's something that I will do again. I love dancehall. I love Calypso. I have a Calypso that I haven't put out onto the airwaves, but it's available from me for free download. Of course, it doesn't have to be free. If you want to pay for it, you can, right? The name of it is I Am Ugly, right? But when he's singing his song, and the name of his song, Squeezy Rankin, the name of his song, I believe, was Justice, right? And he's singing his song, and if you listen, he's not singing the exact same melody every time. He's not singing in the exact same rhythm every time. Sometimes he switches up some of the pattern of the rhyming scheme a little bit. You understand? And so that type of thing probably was irksome to Chalk Dust, hearing it. You understand? Whereas somebody else might be like, well, okay, it was a strong song, it was a strong offering. Having sung Calypso for so many years and having a high standard for it, and also being a professor in things like this in the university, maybe it was irksome to him, I don't know, right? But Calypso has a rigid structure. You lay out your blueprint for this verse, and you copy it exactly for the next verse. You copy it exactly for the next verse. You copy it exactly for the next verse. And the skill in Calypso is being able to lay down something that can be identified with the genre as a blueprint, and then follow it again and again and again while singing on the same topic but advancing the story, or speaking on different aspects of it, or building out the allegory depending on what type of song you're doing, right? So staying within that rigidity, staying within that, and being able to build out a song with different parts, each of which speaks about different things, and keeping things interesting while doing the same thing. This is what gives you the great Calypsonians, because you have the melody and all of these things down already, and now it's very, very important the strength of what you're saying, the strength and clarity of what you're saying becomes very, very important. You understand? Because you have the same thing over and over. It's like a hymnal. I've said before that Calypso is a perfect genre for congregational singing in a church meeting. It's basically the form of a Caribbean hymn. You understand? If you write it in a particular way, it can be used in that way. And so I would encourage that. But yeah, the rigidity of the form of Calypso encourages discipline. And this is not just the discipline to say, well, this verse sounds like this, and therefore this verse is going to sound like that when I'm out of Calypso. No, you can do that, and I have done that, right? But sometimes I might deviate, because deviation is not what I'm against, right? What I'm advocating for, however, is discipline. And if you are engaging in certain patterns in your music, or if certain things need to be a particular way, so for instance, you're trying to hit a certain note, but the stress of the words, you have a certain melody, but the stress of the words that you put on that melody doesn't match the rhythm of that melody. Then you work on it and you put it in place. If the words that you're using don't align with what you're trying to say, but they work with the melody, but the meaning doesn't make sense, you work on it and you put it into place, right? This is what you get through the process of writing a well-formed Calypso, sticking to that rigidity and advancing things the way you have to advance things. You make sure that you're not being lazy. You can't be lazy because everything has to fit together, right? A lot of people are writing these songs for competitions especially, right? Everything has to fit together. Now, when you come out of Calypso, that same mindset of this thing has to work, because I usually say there are two different types of writer's block. There's the bottleneck and there's the dead end. The dead end, if you get to a dead end on the road, that's because you didn't know where you were going, and the problem with that song started before you started writing it, because you didn't know what you wanted to write about and you just started writing. But if you're going through a bottleneck, you just have to keep going. How weird would it be for you to have to get from point A to B, but between point A and B, there's a bottleneck, and so there's traffic leading up to that bottleneck. And because of that traffic, you decide, you know what? I'm going to make a U-turn and go back to A. Doesn't make any sense, right? So with that in mind, having the tenacity to keep going, to get the note that fits, to get the word that fits, the amount of syllables that fit, the rhythm that fits. That is the type of discipline that Calypso teaches. So even if you're not writing a Calypso, when you come out of that now, that discipline stays with you, right? And it means that you're not writing lazily. It means that if it has to be fixed, it has to be fixed. All right? So this is what I believe can be learned from Calypso. Now, for other points that I have here, I'm going to share some examples. But if you're hearing what I'm saying about the rigidity of a form of a Calypso, you can literally go listen to any Calypso and you'll hear what I'm talking about, right? You will hear that every single verse and chorus sounds exactly the same, right? And to get that, you have to focus. You have to get it. You can't be like, well, you see me this time or just You have to. You understand? And that type of discipline to go through that bottleneck type of writer's block will get you from A to B, will get you to where you have to go. You're not going to resign your song or just write whatever, you're going to get to where you have to be because you have the tenacity to go through the bottleneck, to just keep going, just keep going, just press on, same direction. That's the next Calypso, right? Let me go on to the next point, right? Let me read, first of all, some passages here. Jeremiah chapter 8, verses 8 to 11. How can you say, we are wise, and the law of the Lord is with us? But behold, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. The wise men shall be put to shame, they shall be dismayed and taken. Behold, they have rejected the word of the Lord Yahweh. So what wisdom is in them? Therefore, I will give their wives to others and their fields to conquerors, because from the least to the greatest, everyone is greedy for unjust gain. From prophet to priest, everyone deals falsely. They have healed the wound of my people lightly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. All right? Ezekiel chapter 13, verses 8 to 12. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, Yahweh, because you have uttered falsehood and seen lying visions, therefore, behold, I am against you, declares the Lord God, Yahweh. My hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and who give lying divinations. They shall not be in the council of my people, nor be enrolled in the register of the house of Israel, nor shall they enter the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am the Lord God, Yahweh. Precisely because they have misled my people, saying peace when there is no peace, and because when the people build a wall, these prophets smear it with whitewash. Say to those who smear it with whitewash that it shall fall. There will be a deluge of rain, and you, O great hailstones, will fall, and a stormy wind break out. And when the wall falls, will it not be said to you, where is the coating with which you smeared it? All right? So the next point here is candor. All right? Calypsonians, one thing that has always been said is, by Calypso or stories are told. There's the griot tradition that is the ancestor or one of the ancestors of Calypso, which is basically the musical way of dealing with of passing stories down in terms of oral tradition, passing history down, and not just that, also within a royal context, bringing wisdom and candor to a situation, right? Now, the passages that I just read, these were prophets bringing the word of God to, and these are the prophets that we know, right? So Jeremiah and Ezekiel, these are the ones who made it into the Bible, and they're talking to other prophets who didn't make it into the Bible and who were much more popular in their day, more popular than Jeremiah and Ezekiel. I want you guys to keep that in mind, right? These guys were more popular and more numerous than Jeremiah and Ezekiel. These guys were on TBN. These guys were on your radio stations. These guys had big events. These were those guys. You understand? But Jeremiah and Ezekiel, these were the ones who made it into the Bible. Why were these guys so popular? Because they were telling people what they wanted to hear. When Jeremiah and Ezekiel were warning people of the judgment that God is going to bring, these people are out here saying, what judgment? Everything good. You know, this is your year of whatever. This is your year of everything is going to be. No, this is your year of peace. This is your year of double peace. Right? And here Jeremiah and Ezekiel are saying, no, there's no peace. And these people are lying and being disingenuous. All right? Calypso has always served as a way for representatives of the people to speak truth to power. Right? People come forward and they use their calypso to speak out and say what they want to say, right? And everyone hears it, and that is the end of it. Like everyone hears it, and that's just what it is. And if they win a calypso competition, the same people who they was bad talking will shake their hand and tell them congratulations, right? Now, this is unfortunately sometimes a candor and a truth that Christian songwriters, particularly those who are doing faith-based content, can lack, right? And maybe it comes out of the theology, right? The way of thinking that everything is going to work out because you're a Christian, or that that's what God has willed for you, that everything go well. You don't deal with actual things, you don't deal with actual issues, you don't address anything, you just say things that people can jump to, or you say things that people can whatever. One thing that you can learn from Calypso is how to bring truth forward, how to be not a false prophet, but a true prophet. And of course, true prophets don't usually get treated well, right? So there's a temptation to take the false prophet route. You understand? But the Bible says that there's a blessing for you when you're treated like a true prophet. There's a blessing there for you. They deride you, they persecute you for the sake of righteousness. He says, rejoice. All right? So give yourself a reason to rejoice. And you can use your songs not just to, tug on people's heartstrings or give them something nice to sing or whatever. Nothing is wrong with addressing something serious. Nothing is wrong with saying the hard thing. Nothing is wrong with applying the word of God to the situations that are in front of everyone. Nothing is wrong with saying the thing that needs to be said. All right? With the one calypso that I have available for others, that is what I try to do, and I am ugly. All right? What I will read for you guys now, this is an example. And the reason I'm reading this example is not necessarily because, I think this is the best song that does it, but because this song is, the topic of the song is not just, that the Calypsonian is addressing a politician and saying things about a politician. No, not just that. He is also embodying Calypso itself in doing so, and speaking about times in the past when Calypsonians have done this. And so I thought it would be good to read in this context. All right? So this is Kurt Allen, also known as the last Bajan of Calypso. And this is his offering for this year, Your Turn Now. And this was addressed to the Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Keith Rowley, right? When you're listening to this, he most likely will not be Prime Minister anymore. But this is who this was addressed to. So let me read the lyrics, at least a verse and chorus, coupling. You began in the Senate of Opposition and waited your turn. Then with Manning as your PM giving direction, you studied and learned. You paid attention to Robbie, Pandey, Kamla, observed all their mistakes. So there is not one excuse that you can make, none that we will take. We gave you a turn to ride in the PM1 motorcar. You changed the whole interior with propaganda, it's smelling drunk sour. We gave you 2 turns as PM of this nation. So now it's my griot obligation to give you a turn before your resignation. Remember, is we who call Eric Deafy, we call Chambers Dunsey. Is your turn now. Is we who beat Robbie like a bully. Is your turn now. So if we say you are a bully, don't take it personally. Your turn now. Go tell your friends and your family it comes with the duty. Your turn now. Do not believe that we are afraid to call a donkey an ass or a spade a spade. We will pepper you like a chow. Dr. Rao, your turn now. All right? So this is the spirit of this is, in one sense, Dr. Rowley, you say you're going to resign before the end of your term, right? But we are going to reflect on what you did while you were in power, and before you leave, you're going to get a lashing from the Calypso. Other people before you who are being referenced here, they have gotten their own lashing. He said he witnessed what? He watched Manning gave him direction. He paid attention to Robbie. So Manning, that would be Patrick Manning. He paid attention to Ian R. Robinson, Basdio Pandey, Kamala Prasad Besessa. All right? And then you go down now, and he says, is we, as in we Calypsonians, we called Eric Deafy. We called Chambers Dunsey. And we beat Robbie like a bully. These are past people in your position as the Prime Minister who have been criticized by Calypso. And you cannot get away from it. Right? And even in between the verses, he says, before you go, before you pack and run away, before you go, before you think you get away. Okay, I want to move on to my next point now. Let me just read some stuff from Mark chapter 4. Again, he, which is Jesus, began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat in it on the sea. And the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land, and he was teaching them many things in parables. And in his teaching he said to them, listen, behold, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured it. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seeds fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing, and yielding 30-fold, and 60-fold, and 100-fold. And he said, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. All right? And when he was alone, those around him with the 12 asked him about the parables, and he said to them, to you has been given the secret of the kingdom of God, but for those outside, everything is in parables, so that they may indeed see but not perceive, and they may indeed hear but not understand, lest they should turn and be forgiven. This particular thing that we can learn from Calypso is storytelling. All right? Now, this is an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing because sometimes people think about how they can get an edge or write something that's a little different. and it never occurs to them to try storytelling, right? Calypsonians have been doing a lot of storytelling. Sometimes the stories are real, sometimes the stories are twists on actual events, sometimes the stories are completely fabricated and they're there to make a satire out of a real issue, or there are many ways that you can use a story. All right, Jesus used stories in many ways as well, and here we see this is one of the stories that he uses, right? We usually call them parables, but Jesus told a lot of stories and used them to teach and illustrate things, right? And here he says, he who has an ear to hear, let him hear. Now here's the thing about using a story in a calypso, and of course, again, within that rigid structure, you advance in the story verse by verse, verse by verse, right? It's very easy to plan a song that's going to be based on a story, because once you have your story, or at least a rough idea of your story, the song is already planned out. This is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. Look at that, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3. So it's easy in that way, all right? Now, this is something that songwriters in general can learn from Calypso, is how to tell stories, how to be engaging in stories. And the stories have to be engaging, again, because you have that rigid structure that Calypso has. And so whatever you write, it has to be good, because that's what people are going to be paying attention to after a while. The melody is the same, you understand? The rhyming pattern is the same. So what you see has to be what is interesting, all right? So storytelling is something that we should all look to Calypso to teach us, regardless of what we're doing. And we can use storytelling to teach. You read from something as simple as Lewis to something as complex as Tolkien and other authors as well. You see, these stories are teaching things, and it's very easy to have a story that teaches something, all right? Or you can just have a story be an exaggeration of something, right? But yeah, that's something that we can all learn from Calypso. Now, what I will do, all right, is I will read this Calypso. This is one of my favorite Calypsos. And this one comes from the Mighty Bomber, the late great Mighty Bomber. The name of this Calypso is Proverbs. All right? So let's see. I have two verses here. My great-great-grandmother, Mistress Rubble, teach me proverbs and put me in trouble. I wouldn't lie. My great-great-grandmother, Madam Rubble, teach me proverbs and get me in trouble. She say how you make your bed so you lie, and you never miss the water till well run dry. The proverb that really trapped me, my friend, is when she told me that the longest rope have an end. So the next day I went by my partner Pope. I look on the ground, see a piece of rope. I pull the rope till my hand get corn. Well, I never see rope long so since I born. But coming to the end when I raised my head, I had to take off and bawl out, oh God, I dead. The proverb she taught me was so awful, because the next end of the rope was a big pit bull. My great-great-grandmother just called me stupid, dotish, ignorant, and too insipid. She say none of she other great-great-grandchildren never give she horrors, heartache, and problem. She say the more you live is the more you learn, and if you play with fire, you will get burned. My great-great-grandmother then said to me, Bomber darling, the best things in life are free. So I hire a truck and went down by courts, looking for the best things of every sort. I pick up a computer, well, how you mean? Radio, video, stereo, TV, washing machine. And when the store manager confronted me, I say, partners, The best things in life are free. Well, they call the police and lock up my tail, and they give me some free years in the royal jail. All right. So this is obviously a very humorous calypso, and it is evident to the fact that a funny calypso can be written without reference to sex or without trying to be obscene. It's very, very possible. And Mighty Bomber did this. All right. And so this whole calypso is actually masterfully written in terms of comedy, and it gets funnier and funnier without getting smutty at all. All right. And there's a simple lesson here. Even though what we have here is a humorous calypso, not necessarily a very serious calypso that's teaching anything, there is a lesson here, and that lesson you will get into in Proverbs chapter 26 verse 7, which says, like the legs which are useless to the lame, so is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Verse 9 says, like a thorn which falls into the hand of a drunkard, so is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Right? Sometimes, like proverbs, there are certain people who, certain things are just not going to work for them. In terms of wisdom, like you say these wise words to them and it doesn't work for them. Jesus says, who has ears to hear, let them hear. And these are the type of people who they hear, but they didn't really hear what was actually being meant by what was being said. Right? So there you have Mighty Bomber, masterful work in terms of being able to tell stories. All right? So another thing that we see here is obviously humor. All right? And Mary Hard does good like medicine, and this is something that we see even from Mighty Bomber. All right? And humor can also be coupled with candor in order to bring the jabs, bring the prophetic rebuke in such a way that it is easily digestible by people. All right? And for this, I will read Isaiah chapter 14. I'm going to read from verse 3 to verse 17. When the Lord Yahweh has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. The Lord Yahweh has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers that struck the peoples in wrath with unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger with unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypresses rejoice at you, the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter comes up against us. Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you where you come. It rouses the shades to greet you, all who were leaders of the earth. It raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations. All of them will answer and say to you, you too have become as weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home. So this is a passage here in Isaiah where the prophet is being told, here, when you're freed from what's going on, then the people can use this to tease the king of Babylon when he's defeated. Now, some people believe that some of what I just read has to do with Satan. That's a very popular and probably the prevalent traditional view. But first of all, I'm yet to be convinced of that from the text itself. And second of all, the text itself says that this is referring to the king of Babylon. And the day star son of dawn, which would read as Lucifer in the Vulgate, and the King James would render it as Lucifer as well, right? That's not a name for Satan, who again isn't referenced at all here in this passage, but it is a title. Like you think that you're the morning star. You think that you're up there. You think that you are like God because you're the king of the world. And we know from Daniel that the king of Babylon, at least Nebuchadnezzar, did feel that way about himself. And that is why he was reduced to eating grass by God to humble him, right? I believe that was chapter 4 of Daniel, all right? So we know that kings, including the king of Babylon in this instance, have a tendency to see themselves as being the one above whom there is no court of appeal. Like they are at the top. They believe that they are God. Even our government here with no kings tends to think that way as well. Like there's no appeal above them, right? Like there's no God above them. It is a common thing, all right? The only one who would properly receive that title of being the morning star and the place where the king of Babylon thought that he's supposed to be in Revelation, that title is rightfully given to Jesus, all right? So Jesus is legitimately where the king of Babylon thought he was and where he is being teased for thinking he was here in this passage, all right? That's just by the way. The point is that this is a taunt. He's being teased here. This is all being said ironically, humorously, all right? And even though the storytelling example that I used is an example of humor, I want to use another one. And again, in the same way that this Isaiah here is taunting a king and dealing with real issues, dealing with the pride and the divine pretensions and God complex of the Babylonian king, we will have here, we have here that humor is not always used that way. But again, the whole point is that we can take this and use it, couple it with candor and with being able to speak truth and apply the word of God broadly to the situations in front of us facing our society and make some powerful pieces of art. It's quite possible, all right? So my example is going to be Trinidad Rio, Body Parts. I have 2 verses here that I'll read for you. Now we can't live in peace, but dying in pieces. And it didn't look as if this will ever stop. So I'm going wrong and wrong up all them diseases and are opening a human body parts shop. All of them decapitated bodies they find scatter all over the land. I go in and preserve them in my deep freeze and selling substitute and second hand. All them Africans and Indians who don't like their complexion, they don't have to go and pay for no expensive injection. When a white man get killed, I go take off his head, put it on a gollywog or a dalbury instead, so they could frequent every night spot and they can't put you out from Club Coconut. Now I call in my business the Body Rescue, and I put in my office up in the cane. Big and them boys done control the bamboo, so me ain't going and crowd up there again. I call the commissioner of prisons to get me some qualified men with skill. All those all rounder have them butcher license, so them boys could chop up people at will. Just as how them fellas bringing back them derelict vehicle, the same thing I'll be doing to them discontented people. Well, partner, you, that nose on your face, well, you could come in my shop and you could get a replace. And when I done, your facial renew, boy, Michael Jackson and them men want nothing with you. Right? So, what is the serious situation being addressed here? You have racial issues being addressed. You have discontentment with the way God has made you being addressed. But the main thing that is being addressed is actually the murder situation. Right? That's where this all starts. We can't live in peace, but we're dying in pieces. And it didn't look as if this will ever stop. So I go in and rung up all them diseases and open a human body part shop. So this is Rio saying, I'm going to make the most of this gruesome situation of people being chopped up all over the place. And I'm going to make a business out of this, right? Of course, he's not being serious, but this is him using humor to address the issue of the murders, right? Address the issue of the chopping up. You understand? So there's some humor to it, but this is what is being addressed, all right? The last thing that I want to say is that we can learn wit from Calypso. It is very, very easy to say cat, bat, rat, sat. It's very, very easy, comparatively easy to make words rhyme, make them sound good with melody, all of those things. The strength of lyrics start to come out the more you're able to employ literary devices, and not only just employ them, stack them on top of each other. Sometimes just turn of phrases, just interesting ways of saying things, instead of saying the same thing over and over. Sometimes this is what happens. Christian songwriters who write faith-based content, sometimes you hear the same thing over and over, lyrically speaking. Sometimes a song gets big with a particular phrase, and then for the next 2 to 5 years, that phrase finds itself into every gospel song. There is intention behind Calypsonians saying, what is an interesting way to say this thing? What is an interesting way to say the same thing that I'm saying? All right? It takes thoughts to do this. It takes thoughts to do any of what I'm saying. You can't be a slouch and write a calypso. All right? It takes thought to do any of this. And so that is something else that we can learn. All of songwriting can learn from Calypso in particular. It's how to use wit. In particular, my example here, and maybe I'll play another one, right? Because one is coming to mind right now. But my example here is Lord Funny. All right? Lord Funny, I actually don't think that he's the funniest Calypsonian, but he's the Calypsonian whose name is funny, right? But he has this brilliantly written song called The True Sense of the Word, a lot of which I will not read because I don't necessarily agree with the way in which he is using his own gift of gab in this calypso, right? But we can get a sense of it at least here from the first verse. So I'll read the first verse, sort of chorus coupling. Lord Funny, true sense of the word. What's the use of a word if you can't use it? All words were made to use as long as you don't abuse it. You see, they don't say this, don't say that. That does give me vex. Nothing's wrong with a word used in the right context. Criminal swine politics, pardon pseudo racists. They make them words because all them things do exist. You must call a snake a snake. You must call a hog a hog. What else you call a dirty rat, and a dog must be called a dog. Whatever thing you call jackass, and I'm sure all of you have heard, is because the place full of jackasses and are talking about the true sense of the word. Now, if you listen to this song, the entire song, you will hear numerous double entendres. Here, if you just listen to this chorus, you will not appreciate what he's doing at all, right? But as the song progresses, you'll get more and more of an appreciation for it. Here, he's not talking about, he references animals, but these animals are used as pejoratives when speaking about people. You will call someone a snake if you believe that they're deceitful. You will call someone a hog if you believe that they're nasty or greedy. You know, you will call someone a rat if you also believe that they're deceptive, or, you understand, they're treacherous. You call someone a dog if you believe that they're a worthless person. You understand? And jackass is also used as a pejorative. So these are all pejoratives. And the way he's saying it as if he's saying, these are all animals. And the reason we use these words are because what else will we call these animals? We have to call a snake a snake. A hog has to be called a hog. A rat has to be called a rat. A dog has to be called a dog. A jackass has to be called a jackass. What he's really saying is that if that is what that person is, that's what you should call them, right? So there's a great amount of wit that goes into this, all right? And this is very, very, I think this is a good example of wit that we can draw from Calypso and say, well, okay, this in particular, the double entendre or the pun, basically, is saying one thing that means two things. You understand? There's an opposite way to do this as well. So the double entendre and the pun, that's when you say one thing that means two things. But then there is the homonym, where you say a word or a phrase, and then you say a different word or phrase that sounds exactly like the word or phrase you said before, right? So they're two different words or phrases, but they sound the same. If you only say it once with the two meanings, that's double entendre. But when you say it twice with the one meaning, that would be homonym. Homonym means same word, right? Homophone means same sound, right? So you're saying something that sounds the same, all right? Or you could even be creative. Homograph, same, it looks the same spelling, might have a different sound, same spelling. There are creative ways that you can do that, you understand? I'm nerding out a little bit, but the important thing is that that's just an example of what is possible, all right? And the whole idea behind this is for you to be able to look and see, well, okay, there are things that you can learn from this, all right? I think there's one more example of wit that is coming to my mind that I did not write the lyrics for, and that is Pink Panther, Chalky C. And this is where Pink Panther, who is not a cartoon character in this instance, he is a Calypsonian.
I went to hear a chalk dust lecture sponsored by UTT at Napa. Chalky say there are 4 kinds of Calypso. So I said to the professor, could you kindly comment further? Please explain the 4 kinds before you go. Chalky say, number 1 is schoolboy data. Number 2 is Calypso for theater. 3 is for tent, and 4 is for savannah. But I still didn't quite understand, so I asked for a little more explanation. Chalky, could you please give me a description? Chalky say, if you tell the world where Jack Warner grew and how he's a generous fellow, Panther boy, thy schoolboy Calypso. Or if you say the man like to talk just so, anything that come to him out, you know, Panther boy, thy theater Calypso. Or if you say the man does stomach for so, just to say toe, he does say photo, Panther boy, that is for the tent to know. But if you say that Winston Dukaran find that Jack Warner is a loose cannon, so they went to Tobago to discuss the situation. And Kamla cuss up Jack so-and-so after she drink about 3 solo, Panther boy, that is Savannah Calypso. Alive, goodbye, alive.
The point of the Calypso is to criticize a certain side of the political divide, but what he's couching it in is a story where he says this is chalk dust teaching him how to write a Calypso. And he's saying, yo, if you just say it straight just like that, then that's for schoolboys. That's not, you're not really ready to really do Calypso with the big boys. But if you twist it and you put some satire in and you exaggerate the facts and you bring out your point in those colorful ways with a lot of wit behind what you're saying, then that is Savannah Calypso. That is a big boy Calypso. That's the high level of Calypso, right? So I'm remembering that now, and I think that's good in terms of a Calypsonian teaching about how to use wit in Calypso while using it himself and comparing it to himself not using it. And so that is interesting. So again, I hope that this has been, I don't know, educational, entertaining, frustrating, irritating, whatever for you. Hopefully you get some value out of this. And we'll do this again very soon. So you know what it is now. Praise Jesus.
You made it through the whole episode, the show done. Hope you get some positive in the nucleus, you know, a proton. Anyhow, you know the slogan.
Preach Jesus.